Ladies and gentlemen, All Saints Catholic.
That's funny.
Hello,
everybody.
Hi. How's it going?
Welcome back.
I'm well.
I'm waiting for an answer on how's it going, I guess.
Good. Good.
Welcome to Coffee Chats, episode 66.
66.
That's what I put on the thing.
That's what it is now.
That's what it is for the next...
Hello. Okay, so let's just jump right into things.
Honestly.
We got a lot to talk about, I think. Or at least we will talk about a lot. Either way, we will talk for an hour. Maybe even after that. So, what do you guys, scripture passages? No, we do saints first. Sorry. What saints do you guys think have been on your heart? Sorry, I'm like doing like 10 different things at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, saint of the week. That's what we're gonna call it.
Yeah.
Who's your saint of this week?
Saint Bartholomew. Yeah, I think his feast day is on the 23rd or the 24th. So it's not this week, but it's coming up. Not really for any particular reason other than I saw it's coming up, and my family grew up at St. Bartholomew's Catholic Church in Katy, Texas. Like kind of old Katy. Gosh, I think we started going there when I was like, had to be like 8 or 10 between that time, so I don't really remember much of it. But that's where we grew up. That's where we started doing, like, that was my first introduction, like, youth ministry. Had my first, like, youth minister there who's just, like, absolutely incredible. One of the most, like, inspiring, like, leaders I've ever encountered in my life. And, yeah, she, absolutely amazing. That's where I met Jonathan, my now husband, and that's just where, like, that's where my siblings and I became really close, because that was kind of during a time in our lives where, like, I was homeschooled, and I went back to being homeschooled again after a few years in public school, and that's just where we really first encountered and experienced, like, in the Catholic Church. And so those were, like, really, really formative years for myself and for my siblings and kind of our whole friend group and everything. And so, yeah, I attribute a lot to that church and St. Bartholomew and just the impact that he had on that time of my life. You know.
Nice.
And a little bit about his story too, or I need to figure out more about his story, but as far as just on the basis, he's been on my mind with his feast day coming up. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I've been thinking about St. Maximilian Kolbe, whose feast day is also coming up. I think it's on Saturday, or it was last Saturday. I don't know. He was our junior high weekly email saint of the week. So I was each one, so I spent a minute looking at his stuff, and I found that picture of all the amazing things that he did and the sacrifices that he made, and the being a martyr and all that. But then there's also just like his entire life and work before that. And I always love this picture that I found of it's him at his desk sometime before the war, and it's just a disaster. I mean, like he's writing or reading or whatever, and there's just stuff everywhere. He's got this like bookshelf, and there's papers like stuffed in everywhere. It's like, oh, good, okay, maybe there's some hope for me. if my life can look like that, maybe, and then also be like, there's it's kind of ridiculous, but I really do appreciate the just the story of his life and the kind of person that he was, and the kind of inspiration he's been for Catholics going forward. And so it's just he's a very cool dude.
Yeah.
How about you, Paul?
Randomly came across, I tried to go to Mass every day this week, and then ended up only going to Mass like 2 days this week. But different things happened for different reasons. And so I guess it was Monday, I think, that it was the feast day of, or maybe it's actually this upcoming Monday, but I was looking through the calendar and trying to get the readings right. But the 15th, whatever day that is the feast of Saint Alypius, who I've never heard of before, but was a good friend of Saint Augustine's. They grew up together. They did things together all the time. They were baptized together. St. Augustine actually references him multiple times as leading him to sanctification as well. So I know we've talked about it before, like how cool it would have been to like be the companions of those people that are very well-known saints. Like St. Ignatius gets all of the credit, but was roommates with St. Francis and St. Peter Faber.
Yeah.
St. Peter Faber.
So there's all these like tie-ins that it's like, oh man, that's really cool. So just proves that if you surround yourself with good people, you become a better person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How about you guys for scripture passages?
Nothing. Not one in particular. We were talking about the reading from Revelations for this upcoming Sunday, right? The woman in the dragon is what it is. And then yesterday, whenever we went to the staff Bible study, we were talking about another reading from Revelations, and I started to realize that I have just not looked at this book enough in my life. So not really one verse in particular, but just looking at it as a whole. I really enjoyed my, what were they called? Literary traditions classes in college. So like diving into like any sort of reading was always like really interesting. I really enjoy it, and so I'm kind of starting to experience that a little bit more as going through like Revelations. But it's the Bible, so it's like 10 times cooler than like, I don't know, Crime and Punishment or something. So I'm kind of feeling like a little pull to just like really dive into that book and just see all that it holds, because I've just never kind of taken the time to do that. I've never really experienced it other than like the daily or Sunday Mass like readings, and even then you just kind of like gloss over it, because it's very, in my head it's very like, I don't know how to describe it, very like storybook, very like kind of like fantasy style, but knowing there's so much more to it, I think I really want to start looking into it more and kind of studying it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it reminds me. It actually reminds me of what I was going to say. So I don't know if that counts as reminding, but it's just a thing.
Good.
So I've been trying to read through the daily readings, even if I haven't been going to Mass. Right. Like at least do that much. And so every morning that's what I've been doing while I'm drinking my coffee, which I now do, because that's how I get up, apparently. But the
whatever works, right?
Yeah. But I'm reading through my St. Joseph Missal thing, and it's got the readings for year 1 and year 2 for the daily readings. So the wrong readings for yesterday were actually from Ezekiel, I think. Might have been Isaiah. It's the call where he tells him to like eat the scroll and then go preach. Was that Isaiah? Or?
I think that's
Ezekiel.
Okay.
Yeah. Just went it.
Okay. Yeah. So at this point next year, we'll, I guess, come back to that in the Mass. But it's just such a weird thing. It just reminded me of, or you reminded me of that in the Revelation. Just like you could read all the way through Revelation as a kid, but like there's something that like you have to understand a little bit more, and as you grow up. And I remember at some point, I've heard this, I don't know how true this was, but there was, for those who were, is it Frozen? No, sorry, I just thought that.
No, somebody said Yoda looks like a saint card next to Paul, and I was like, what? He's over there. And then I forgot we have this Yoda as well.
Yeah.
This right here.
Because oh, jeez.
So yeah, Yoda on the same, I'm pushing it the wrong way. There we go.
There we go. Nice.
Saint Yoda of Tatooine.
Dagobah.
Dagobah.
Yeah, honestly.
Sorry.
Oh.
Said it.
That was
Regretted it immediately. Clearly, I'm a monster.
That's. Oh gosh. Where? Yes. Sorry. So I was thinking, somewhere along the way, I heard that there was a rule for those who were studying Torah that Ezekiel was one of those things you couldn't study it formally until you were like 30 or 35 or something. Again, I don't know how true that is, but there's some wisdom in that of like, this is really weird stuff. I think Revelation is kind of like, there's a wisdom you have to have before looking into that, which the reading is kind of talking about from Ezekiel, where he's like, hey, I want you to go preach to people. He's like, I don't know about that. And then he tells him to, at least in his vision, to eat the scroll of God's word. He said it, and then he just goes and preaches. And so again, a weird image, but I think it's a cool image for.
So I need to eat the book first.
Yes.
Eat a copy of Revelation.
That's where this was going.
Study it.
And then study it. Okay. On my to-do list.
You need 2 copies.
Let me know how that works.
Oh,
By the way,
yeah.
unless you want to do it in the opposite order.
I'm sure we have enough up here.
Okay.
Probably don't wanna
As
read
many as I
it.
need to before I understand them.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Good plan.
Mm.
How about you, Paul? Before we start eating the Bible.
Yeah, this not Sunday, because Sunday's Feast of the Assumption threw off all our readings for different things, but the following Sunday, we get back into the Bread of Life Discourse, John chapter 6, and this is where he kind of explains even deeper that, like, this is the bread of life, and this is what all this means. And they're like, no, we're good, and half of the people leave, it says. Or maybe it's even more than that. And finally he turns to the 12, and he looks at Simon Peter, and he's like, you gonna leave me too? And they're like, if we left you, where would we go? Like, we don't have anybody to go to. There's nobody else that we would follow. So this is it. And I like to think of what that would look like, that conversation. I like to, and this is probably why I've referenced The Chosen 1,000 times in 66 episodes, is because I'm like, this is what it looks like. Because I do the same thing when I hear the scripture passages. I'm like, what would it be like if I was standing right there? Like, I'm not Peter, I'm not Jesus, but if I'm in the scene and I'm one of the characters that's around, one of the other 11, what's my response? And then when Peter responds for the group, where else would we go? Am I one of the ones that's just like, yeah, where else would we go? Or am I one of the ones like, I don't know, anywhere? Like, something's got to be better than eating this man's flesh. And so I just, I've always loved these kind of questions that he asks of, like, then just do something about it. Either you believe or you don't, but make a decision. It goes back to, we've talked about Revelation 3:16 how many times, like, you don't become Jesus vomit. Like, you're either hot or you are cold. If you're lukewarm, I'm spitting you out. Like, do not be that. So yeah, I think of this as one of those moments where it's like very clear. You are either going to follow me because you do believe I'm the Messiah, or you're going to leave with them. Just pick one. That's what you got to do. And that kind of leads me to a question that I would like to ask you guys, and we can reflect on it. And maybe, Erica, if you want to go first, because I think you've already mentioned it a little bit. In this conversation where Jesus says this, of like, are you going to leave me too? And they're like, who else do we follow? Clearly, these are men that have seen the leadership and value what Jesus is doing. And you mentioned that you had a youth minister when you were at St. Bartholomew's that was somebody that was a great leader for you. So I guess let's start there, and then we can talk about, what are some leadership attributes that we see, like who are those people that have modeled that for us?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to go first?
Yeah, gosh, where to start with her? I keep saying in past tense, she's like, I don't know. She is.
Past tense because she was your youth
She
minister.
was
Right,
my
there
youth
you go.
minister, yeah. She's incredible. Her name was, what in the world? Miss Beth. I was almost about to blank on her name, and that would have been really bad.
Clearly it was the
Miss
last
Beth.
thing in that.
But it was the kind of situation where you see similarly. Am I saying that?
That's why you need
Words.
to do it.
You see it a lot in other churches, of where whenever I came into youth ministry, she was the mom of a couple of the teens who were in our program, and I got there after she'd been there for maybe like a year or two, so I don't know exactly what the transition was like, but she's just someone who stepped up and was like, my kids are in this, I'm going to volunteer to do this, and then she stuck around like the entire time that I was there, and even a little while after, but yeah, even just the fact that she stepped up, she took hold of this program and made it something that was people were so drawn to, but because they were drawn to the church and they were drawn to the faith, not that they were specifically drawn to her, if that makes sense. Like, she made it to where it wasn't about something that she created, but something that she was trying to exemplify in a way. And so that's one thing that I've always like really wanted to take into account in ministry and like in the young adult program, of like, I don't want this to be something that I do, but something that I try to put out. And if that makes sense. But yeah, she's just incredible. I remember going through all of my pastoral ministry classes at UD, And as far as I know, she had not taken like any sort of ministry class. This was purely like a volunteer position for her. And every class that I was in, I would just end up talking about her because the things that we were learning about in leadership and communication and teamwork, all sorts of stuff, I was like, she was doing all of this, and I'm sitting here having to like learn it, if that makes sense. Like, this was already a part of who she was naturally, and this is part of just like what she knew to be. And these are things that I would not have even considered or would not have like thought through just on my own. So that just speaks like great volumes to the kind of person she was. She was always someone who everyone knew and everyone loved, but also anytime you talked to her, you know, you were the only person around, and she would remember things that you had told her like in confidence like years ago, or just like I could go up to her and have a conversation now. We don't talk like super often anymore, and she would ask me about like a situation from like 5 years ago. And
That's
just
awesome.
Yeah, so it just says a lot about who she was as a person. And just incredible. Yeah, exactly. Like, and I think that's someone like y'all have shown too, exactly like the kind of person you want to be in a ministry position, is someone who, whenever you communicate with them, you just feel like you're the only person in the world that matters at that point. And so yeah, she's absolutely incredible.
Cool. How about for you, Andrew?
Yeah, I like just that last part of like the person, like having a conversation, you feel like they're the only person that matters to them in that moment. I've only had, I mean, I've a lot of people that do that, but I remember once or twice in my life there's been somebody who's just like, oh, you really are, wow, you really care. That's always been.
You're listening to me.
Listening to me, yeah, and that's awesome. So yes, but I think, yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of great people who I would consider leaders. I mean, that my youth minister in high school, I don't know if I would reference him as much, but just kidding. Honestly, yes,
Definitely not.
And since then as well as as a leader for that and for this team, you're an awesome leader. But I just think about a lot of I was in band in high school and really loved that. I had a lot of great band directors over those 4 years, and one of those, I remember, they're all really great people and great leaders. I remember my junior year, I had Mr. Condrath, who is probably not watching this, but in case you are, hi. You're on Facebook, so I don't know. It was his last year of teaching as a band director. He's moved on after that to be like the coordinator of music for everything for I was about to say the diocese, for the school district. And throughout that year, just the way that you could tell he, not just that he cared about us and about the music, but like, I don't know. It was that he was really invested in how things went. It wasn't like, if you guys mess up, that's your problem. You know, but he really cared about every student he interacted with, and every moment that he had, he made sure it mattered. I remember in particular, he was the jazz band director too, and there was one moment he's a really good jazz player and director, so that's one of his big specialties. And we were working on, I forget what the song was, and he kept pushing us a little bit more on getting into, I forget honestly what it was, but I just remember him, that last time we got through it and we just nailed it and everything happened and it was amazing and we all just totally went beyond our own expectations, and he's like, never forget that. Like, remember how this happens, remember how this works. And I just remember that moment and so many others of just, obviously in a different context than a parish or youth ministry or anything of that sort, but somebody who draws you towards what is good. And I'm grateful to him for that and so many others, but just really, I think that's been a good example for me.
That's awesome.
I mean, there's so many different people to look at in my life that have been great leaders. It's probably cheating to be like your parents, but my mom and dad were fantastic growing up, and it's always funny that I think I'd probably too harshly sometimes talk about how they are not Christian. My mom posts stuff all the time that we do here now at All Saints, and watches Mass online and adoration, so it's kind of funny. But they raised us with very Christian values, And when I moved to Houston, I didn't really know a lot about God. I was a senior in high school, moved in the middle of my senior year. I didn't know a lot about God, but the youth minister that I had was somebody who really took time to like care about us. His name is Scott. He's my godfather. He helped baptize one of my children. Well, he didn't help, he did. But it was one of those things that just like, I think it was the humility. He knew that he made mistakes. He knew that he was not perfect. He knew that he was not necessarily fully equipped to be the youth minister in what we look at now. And like, you know, we kind of laughingly, I was talking to Father Jovita and Phil that, you know, our job descriptions are like 7 pages long. And some of that is because it's very redundant, but some of it is also like, there's a lot of responsibility that goes into youth ministry now that was not the same even when I started out, and it was part-time, and it was like, show up for this hour and a half, plan at some point, ready to go. And it was like, oh. And right, like, you think about all the papers and classes that we take now, and like, I've jokingly said that like, if you put the initials of every certificate you got behind your name, like that I could have filled out the alphabet like 2 or 3 times now, because it's just, you take all these training classes, you do all these things. But really what it comes down to is, and I think you guys have both echoed this, it's who's leading you to greatness. Like who is forcing you to be a better person. And that was what Scott was. And it wasn't that he was going to push me that way. It was always going to be, I will walk with you. And there's going to be moments where I probably will have to carry you through some of this. And that's what I'm here for. And I think it's funny, you know, it changes throughout your life, like those stages of what leadership looks like, and what that modeling is. I mean, Scott was my youth minister when I was in high school. We worked together until I had moved away, but he was still part of my life for everything. And then, you know, my wife is probably the person now that if I said I had to pick one leader right now that I look to, it's her, like because of her faith and her strength and her ability to do things, and she's incredibly talented at so many things, and so many of them are things that I'm terrible at, which is probably why it's like you're the perfect person for me, because I'm not organized, and I'm not like you were talking about Maximilian Colby's desk. If we panned the camera around, I have 2 desks in this office, one that's in this room, and one that's in the actual office, and I can't sit at either one of them. So now I sit at Chelsea's old desk, which is also slowly becoming a mess. Which, you know, for me, it's like I can function in all of this because I know where everything is in that mess. But for other people, it's like, why is your desk disgusting? It's not. It's organized within my chaotic brain.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So for you guys that are watching, who are some of those leaders that have impacted you and why? The leadership skill for me, if we were talking about leadership skills, I know we've gone through Strength Finders, we're going through that as a staff right now, and there's a lot of really great things that are in that. One that I don't see in there, and one that I think gets forgotten very often, that I always like to talk about when we take our 8th graders out for the retreat that we do at the beginning of the year for leadership. Humility, I think, is something, you know, I used to, and probably should get back to praying the litany of humility more often, just because I think it's something that's so important to remember that I can only lead people so far. I have to be able to point them in the direction of something that is beyond me and greater than I am. And so, you know, whatever that might be, maybe it's that I'm, as the director of family ministry here, my job is to direct as many people as I can to Father Jovita, to the bishop, to the Pope, to Jesus, you know, and whatever ways that we can do that. But I think if we get wrapped up in the fact that we're the end person, like I'm the most important here, then we fail to be good leaders. So, what about you guys? Is there like a specific skill or anything that it's like, yeah, this is what I see in leadership that really stands out? I know there's hundreds, but
yeah, I honestly think along the lines of what you were saying, I was going to say vulnerability is a big thing for me. Yeah, just as a whole, and I'm going back to Miss Beth, something that I always really liked about her leadership was that she was not someone who made it very clear that she was not someone who had this perfect life. She had everything figured out. She knew everything about the faith, and she, was just there to like share with us. She was very open about like her own struggles as they were happening, and her own kind of even like her own struggles with the faith, and bringing in like, say if I were to bring a question to her, she'd be like, you know what, I don't have an answer for you about this. Like, that is also something that I've struggled with. Like, let's go through it together. And things like that. And so that's something I've always really wanted to exemplify. Some example that I've got from her with that is, that aspect of vulnerability, and just realizing that you can be a ministry leader and also, you are kind of exactly following along with people. You're still in that same place with the people that you're leading. And the second you try to imagine or something, yourself above any of that, it just falls apart, because that's not the point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
How about for you, Andrew?
I think just thinking through this, I don't know if it's an ability or the willingness to address everything or anything. I'm thinking about a couple of people, including my dad, just of like when I was growing up with our family, it was just the four of us, but whenever something happened or something was wrong, or there was some discussion that was off or awkward or uncomfortable that needed to be had, he was willing to say, okay, let's sit down, let's talk it out, let's do this. And I'm thinking about other times, just a couple of weeks ago, Father Jovita at that staff meeting was just like, hey, we have a bunch of problems, let's work on these things among the staff. And he's just totally willing to be open about that, not in a way that's like, like I'm a realist, so I tell the truth even if it hurts. Like, well, yes, but you don't have to be a jerk about it.
Right.
So there's a balance there, but you have to share the truth charitably, which that's everybody's responsibility. But I think especially as a leader, being able to address the things that are happening while also
I think me just like loving the concept of vulnerability.
Yeah.
I think that makes me think of that as well too, and just being able to break down those walls while, what's the word? Keeping up boundaries too, and kind of like understanding the balance of that. But in a sense, I feel like being vulnerable is being realistic and being able to address those things in a way that is, like you said, very charitable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right. Charity is a huge part of it. Father Jovita said in his homily yesterday, I believe it was, that it's the reading from Matthew where it was, if you have a problem and you've sinned against your brother and you have this situation, you go to them and you talk to them, and if that doesn't work, you go with the witnesses and you talk to them, and if that doesn't work, then you bring them to the church community and you talk about it that way. And then from there, you have the conversation of how are we going to fix these things, and if none of those things work, you treat them as you would a tax collector, to which the immediate thought that I think everybody has is like, oh, the Jews hated the tax collectors. And he said, but how did
Is it?
it
Whoa.
freeze? Maybe?
I thought it only did that once a day. Darn. I'm just gonna put it back on you.
Yeah. So, anyways, he goes. Father Jovita in his homily said, but how did Jesus tell us to treat the tax collectors? You still have to love them.
Right.
And this goes back. We've talked about this so many times that love is not a feeling that you get in like these Ed Sheeran love songs. It's you want what's best for the other person, and sometimes that's uncomfortable, and sometimes people don't like to hear that, but either way, the reality is, like, you've got people and treat people with love. And I think that's a good thing. One of the examples that we always give on this retreat is we've all talked about how we're Marvel fans and movie fans and different things like that. I haven't watched all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe like you guys, but the first one I saw was Iron Man. But then when Captain America came out, one of my favorite scenes is they're all jogging along the path as they're going through training, and he's all of like 10 pounds. He looks like very unhealthy as he's running. And they get to the flagpole, and they're like, flagpole means you're halfway there if you want to take a ride back with, is it Peggy?
Yes.
Yeah. Then, whoever can get me down that flag. And they all try, and nobody can do it. And here comes Steve, all, 10 pounds of him. And he pulls, like, the pin out, and he just grabs the flag. And it's like, yeah, like, that's part of leadership. It's like thinking outside the box. And then the very next scene, they throw the grenade, and everyone runs except for him, and he willingly jumps on top of it. And it just kind of shows that, like, okay, leaders understand that, like, I've got to take one for the team. I've got to be the one who can sacrifice to think outside of the box, to do those things. And I think that's so important when we look at leaders also, is who are those people that are willing to sacrifice things so that other people are not hurt in some sort of way. And ultimately, right, like when we talk about leadership and leadership modeling, Jesus is the best example of that. The computer is super glitchy today.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's probably because I'm
watching like the feedback, and it's like jumping all over the place.
Interesting. It's not ideal.
But yeah, I mean, Jesus being the ultimate leader, obviously the person who made the ultimate sacrifice for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Cool.
Yes.
You solved leadership.
We solved it.
Done.
We are done with leading and leadership.
Yeah,
and it's over.
Yeah.
Did we listed our strengths last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we were talking about it with
So,
leadership.
yeah.
I'm really excited that next week we will have a recorded coffee chat episode that comes out, because we'll be in the middle of a leadership training that we're doing here at the parish. I'm kind of excited about it. I know that some people that's not really their thing, but I'm excited that, he cut it shaving, Adam, sorry. But yeah, so I'm excited. I think it's a great opportunity. Father Jovita said in the same staff meeting, or maybe a different staff meeting, he's really excited about us working together as a family group to do things that are best for the entire parish, to move forward and to help each other accomplish those things. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah. I think it'll be good.
Good. So, Rick, question. We were talking about leadership a little bit earlier this week when last week, we were looking at our plans for retreats coming up. And I think this came up I don't know, I remember this question growing up with different talks about leadership and things. How can you, all of these leadership things, how do you be a leader when you're not like officially a leader of anything? Like you're not a teacher, you're not the president of whatever club, you're not a youth minister, you're not the class president. Like you're just another person. You don't have anybody that you're in charge of. Like how do you, there's certain ways that you don't lead in that case, but how are there other ways that you do lead, I guess, even just as a person? What does leadership mean for somebody, just a normal person, if you will?
That's a good question. I'm trying to,
Sorry,
honestly, I'm. We had this conversation, talking about like organizational leadership, and one of the things that we were looking at in this organizational leadership class was, are leaders born, or can they be taught to lead? And it talked about how, like, most natural born leaders have 70% of said skills, or everyone can learn 70% of this leadership stuff. Natural born leaders seem to have more of that somehow. And I think God has blessed me with a lot of natural leadership skills that I feel like maybe I've put myself in those positions, or I've been asked to be in those positions, that it's hard for me to think of, like, man, when was I not a leader? Like, I remember being in, like, kindergarten and being the guy who was, like, leading the troublemaking on. So I guess the difference there is, like, what is good leadership versus what is effective leadership. I was a very effective leader as a young kid. I was not a very good leader. It's like, hey guys, if we all throw rocks at that, I bet we can break it. Kind of leader. Specifically remember that in kindergarten. So yeah, I think you don't have to be in charge of anything to be a leader either. I think it's all about the example that you set. I've talked about that one of my strengths is that I'm a woo, and that maybe that's part of it, is that I've always just been totally comfortable telling other people, like, hey guys, we should all go do this just to see what happens. And people follow, like, especially if you have confidence and you kind of express. I mean, there's been times that I've told people things and they're like, wait, really? And I'm like, no, I was an absolute lie. But you, like, you just say it confidently, and they're like, oh wow, and it's like, I was just totally kidding. Yeah, and I think it's just how you live your life, and I think people follow what they see is good. We've referenced the reading before of St. Paul, where he goes into the synagogue, and the whole idea is that depending on who you were, what your status was, you were the person who was speaking when you came into town. So we likened it to if Bishop Kelly came to All Saints on Sunday, you would just defer to him to be the person who gave the homily, or Bishop Burns, or Cardinal DiNardo, or so on and so on up the chain. Like, whoever's above you, you kind of default to them. And so Paul's walking through, and they're like, oh, wait, Paul's here, let him do it. And everybody was like, this is not an eloquent speaker. He's not good at this the way that, we've talked about, like, charismatic leadership and people who, like, you can get to follow you. But what he said was absolute truth. And with that truth, thousands were converted that day. And when they asked him about it, he just flat out said, he's like, because truth is attractive to people. Like, they want that. And so I think that's another part of leadership, that when people see you and see that you're doing something good, it doesn't matter if you're the smartest or the fastest or the biggest or the strongest, like, that's somebody that I want to listen to, because they've got that integrity, they've got that truth, they've got that charisma. It's a combination of all these things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only other way I would answer that is, like, just totally be yourself. People are going to be attracted to that honesty as well. So.
Yeah, I think, like, speaking of, like, kind of being, like, natural leader versus, like, having to learn it, I think myself kind of coming from the other end of that, I very much, like, did not grow up a natural leader. Is something I had to develop and, like, learn different skills and different. All the classes I took were very good and very much needed. But I think about, like, something that again, Miss Beth had told me, like, the first time we were leading a retreat, I had, like, I think we had talked about, like, no small parts before, but I had a very small role in this retreat, because that's what I wanted. I was like, I can't do anything in, like, a major leadership position. It's just not where I was at, like, time whenever I was in high school. And a conversation that I had with her was just, like, I don't have to be, coordinator. I don't have to be, like, the person in charge of this to be someone who's seen and, like, respected as someone who can lead. It was all about taking the job that you've been delegated and doing it with joy and confidence and putting everything you have into that one thing. And so that was what I did. I think it was something like, I didn't have like a team of people. I can't remember what I was doing. It was like the very first retreat I ever led or had any like leadership kind of little mini position in. But that's kind of really what we summed it up to, was just having that joy in doing everything, understanding that it's for a greater purpose. And then that was like one of the most joyful things I've ever done. And then I started to realize like, wow, I think I like leading these retreats a lot more than one that I expected, to like being on them. I'm like, this feels more comfortable than any position I've ever been in. And then so with that, and then like taking classes purely based on leadership and different things like that, there were a lot of skills that I had to learn and acquire before. Like I don't fully understand what it means now to be a leader. I can't say that. And there's a ways to go, but still going back to that basis of just taking what I've been given to do, my vocation, and doing it with as much joy as possible and understanding the purpose of it, all for like the greater glory, and just understanding that that is my best way to be a leader. Whether I'm ministry leader or president one day, who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
Anything can happen.
I mean, you're pretty important already, so.
Yeah. I'm already most important
Definitely
here,
the
so
most important.
Basically.
Yeah.
Can't really go up any more than that.
The next step is president.
Yeah, that's next.
You skip
Level up.
everything to become president. Yep.
Sounds good.
I would not want to be president.
No.
That'd be
No thanks. I'm gonna
That's
opt out of that one. They
Yeah.
asked me about it, and I said no.
Pass.
Yeah.
Well, at least they asked.
I know.
There you go. Yeah, I think with that, and that's my own question, but yeah, like you said, coming from more of a, I don't know if for me it was more just like a shyness and like kind of being overly self-conscious when I was a kid, but because I've had a lot of leadership roles and things, but anytime that I wasn't, told like you are the leader of this thing, it's very much just like, okay, I'm just gonna exist
stay in this
maybe,
corner,
and then
yeah.
Watch way back here.
yeah. And so it was, I guess for me, it was a little bit of both, but I'm thinking about, so I used to work at Chick-fil-A in high school, which was awesome because I ate Chick-fil-A all the time. And I didn't get tired of it. People ask, like, don't you get tired? And no.
We know.
No,
We know
I
it
didn't.
hasn't changed.
It still happened. But I remember, the other coworkers, there were some managers and there was our, general manager person. And so there was the structure there too. But of the other just basic, with the
Like
bottom
the-
level,
Yeah.
just, cashier, front or cook, the guys that didn't have any other promotions like me. Just thinking about like those that really, really cared about that, at least as long as you're, there, you're totally there, you're giving it your all, and I'm just thinking in those circumstances, everyone else around would be like, well, either like, dang it, you're showing me up, don't do so well because now I have to do better, or it's like I want to do better because somebody else is showing me that you can, and that's not, not every situation is like that, but it kind of goes with what you said of just like being yourself, being the best or the holiest person you can be. That's already attractive to people, whether you say anything or not.
Yeah.
Not that you shouldn't at some point, but just the idea of doing good things and being the best person you can be, that God wants you to be. Like that's already just shining a light that you can be a leader. So yeah, I appreciate y'all sharing that.
There's a question, Preston. Do you think there is ever a time, Preston Thompson? Do you know Preston Thompson?
Oh wait, yeah.
Yeah.
I know him.
We're saying,
Yeah.
Christ the King.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, we need to get lunch with him.
I know.
Hi,
Hi,
Preston.
Preston.
How you doing, man?
He works where?
Christ the King.
Oh, okay. What does he do
Is
then?
there No, I think he's there down the dole. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure I was
near
listening
Dole.
with
Something
it.
along those lines. Sorry, you can.
Yeah,
Is that
we
not
need to
Josh?
hang out.
But-
Hey, Preston. How's it going?
Overstep
Everybody else
the
apparently
leader
knows
above you. if you
Do you ever think there is a time to overstep the leader above you if you see fit? I think this would be one of those that goes back to that gospel reading that I was talking about. Like, go to them, talk to them, try to understand what their position is and why. And if that doesn't work, you take people with you. And if that doesn't work, well, you work for a church, so you take it to the church. You know, the hard part with how to answer that question is it's all situational. You know, it would be really easy for me to go above. Well, I guess I was going to say to go above my boss to the pastor, but that is my boss. If you guys had something that it was like, I am really frustrated with Paul's decision on this, I'm going to go to the pastor. That might be the right thing to do if it's the best thing for the parish, and I'm like, no, you guys are dumb, don't do that. So it's like, okay, no, they're not dumb, we're right, Paul's wrong, we gotta go to him. But it would be, maybe there's a reason that the decision was made that I think you'd have to look at sometimes too, right? Because there's also conversations that are had among a leadership staff. I try to be really transparent with you guys, and hopefully I do that, but you know, in some situations it's, here's what's going on, that's final, we're not talking about this beyond this. And then if I come back and I'm like, no, we're not doing that, well, you may not like the reason that I've said that, and you may want to go to the pastor to say that, but if you don't know the situation, then that's hard to do. So yeah, the hard part, Preston, with that question is it's all situational sometimes. You know, it really just depends on what it is. And I think if it is for the greater good, then it does become necessary. But I think the hard part with that is sometimes we have to discern, is it for the greater good of the larger community or the greater good for ourselves?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things I would like to do that it's like, this would make my life a lot easier if we did it this way, but it may not be what's best for the whole staff, or maybe even for our office, right? So it's like, okay, then there's other ways to have to handle this.
Yeah. I remember some talks in actually seminaries, so you may have had some of these conversations as well, that we were in seminary together. That's part of that. So,
Preston?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was 2 years behind me? I don't know. You know. But just talks about obedience, especially in like a religious context of like somebody taking a vow of obedience,
Yeah.
Like the religious life, the priesthood, that kind of thing. And, you know, to some extent, how we should, you know, follow our pastors and our bishops and all of those things. Like there's a point at which like you have to, you know, do something. The recent, you know, all the scandals and things. Like there's a point at which you have to go above people. You have to you have to say no to things. But as on that level of like obedience, even if it's a leader you don't like or they're doing something you don't ask. I remember at the seminary there was I forget what it was, but there was it was flu season, and back when that was our biggest concern. Thank God, but the
least pandemic.
Yes, and so the rector, as you know, the superior of the house and even of the other priests, he said, for everyone's safety and all this, it's not something we're unfamiliar with now, but just I would ask all of you to receive communion in the hand for, you know, for however long this lasts, so that we can live in the same building. Like we want to avoid any of us getting sick. And and some guys, you know, did and sometimes didn't. I remember talking with my spiritual director, and he's saying, if you really want to fulfill that vow of obedience, or, you know, not that we had taken it yet, but if you really want to be obedient in that situation to your superior, like, you know that he's asking you to. Like, maybe he can't force you to, maybe he doesn't want to force you to, but like, you know where he's leading you in this case. Like, his desire is that you receive communion in the hand. It's like, please, real obedience is doing that. So like, in some cases there's like that desire, or that need to just do it in that case. But yeah, there is definitely a point there. Like if somebody really had a problem with that, like go talk to him.
Yeah. See, and I think that's a perfect example. You brought up two really good things. The scandals that happened. Absolutely. If I was aware of something that happened, or okay, let's go back to the other model that we were talking about, or the previous example. If you knew that I was doing something that was wrong and harmful, absolutely you go over my head. If we have a problem with what's happening right now, COVID, again, the bishop has said we expect people to wear masks at Mass. Do you be obedient, as frustrating as all of us have felt through all of this, or do you just do what they're asking you to do because they're trying to figure out what's the best thing to do? Because they're not doctors. They're following the advice of the people that they have around them. So I think that's a great example. And then Catherine, your question of what made Jesus an effective leader. I would even go back to what I had talked about with the reading or the mass scripture passage that's really been standing out. A very effective leader, but he also drove a lot of people away. But in driving those people away, he also strengthened the mission that he was doing. He lost numbers, but I think he gained deeper understanding of truth from those that were willing to stay and to follow him. And so I think sometimes as leaders, we have to be okay with expressing truth that is uncomfortable, to give people the opportunity to discern for themselves those harder parts of our faith, or those harder parts of reality, whether it's at your job or in your home or in your family or whatever it is, and that you allow them to make that decision. And sometimes it's going to drive people away. And I can't even imagine. I mean, clearly there were enough people who hated the disciples and their leadership that they were willing to kill them as well. And so I think that's part of our job as leaders. For those people who want to be leaders in the faith, you have to understand that you're going to have conversations that are uncomfortable, that are going to cause conflict and hopefully not death to the extent of physical death and pain, but death of relationships and hardships and things that are going to drive people away. But they never gave up in doing that. It didn't matter whether or not they were threatened or what the conflict was. They always stood by the truth, but they did so out of love, out of charity. And I think that's what made them so effective, is that it didn't change the way they were doing things. They stayed fast, they stayed on course, they kept to their truth, no matter what came their way. And it was okay to hurt people's feelings. I mean, my goodness, I used to joke around that I didn't feel like I was effective in youth ministry unless I was making kids cry, and it was a joke, but the reality was there was a lot of times when people walked away and they were very upset with conversations that we had. But I also think that giving them that truth is what probably helped make me somewhat successful in youth ministry. And all of that comes from the Holy Spirit. I don't take any credit for any of it because, my goodness, I am a mess. Even if I'm God's mess, Adam, I'm still a mess either way. But I think that's it, right? If we continue to point people to the cross and Jesus' death on the cross and Jesus' resurrection, and we do it in the way that we are taught and ought to do through the Scripture and catechism of the Catholic Church and what we know from tradition and from our faith, there will be people that we hurt along the way, but we will strengthen those hearts that are open to it, and hopefully help tear down some of the walls that we build around our hearts before that. So, yeah, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answers your question.
So I think
it's
roughly
about time. Guys, we are super excited. We got a brand new special edition lightning round intro just for you today, episode 66. Here we go.
The lightning round.
We can't do it, but they can.
There it is.
So big,
Yeah.
Was that right?
So now you've heard that.
They can.
There it is.
That was amazing. Sorry.
Jeez.
All right. Well, let's get to it.
All right. Oh, wait,
So you got to ask the questions. Oh,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
my
I
guy.
was
the
waiting for
things
Oh,
with
boy.
the okay.
Here we go.
Ready?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Just
Good?
cutlery. I
Careful.
looked directly into the lights. That was my
that'll
own fault.
do it. Yeah, sorry.
All right, ready? 3, 2, 1. Would you rather have a head the size and shape of a baseball or of a loaf of bread?
loaf of bread? Like the entire loaf?
Like, which direction is the loaf going?
Is it this way?
Is it like
I
that?
guess you can decide if you really
We got our giraffe necks again.
There we go.
Okay, I'll go loaf of bread because baseball
Baseball.
would be weird.
Yeah, loaf of
Yeah,
bread.
I think loaf of bread. Would you rather be able to talk to land animals or animals that live underwater? Sea creatures?
I think I left the office locked.
No, it's okay.
Oh.
Sorry, say that again.
Would you rather be able to talk to land animals or animals that live underwater? What would you call them? Sea creatures.
Underwater animals?
Underwater
Non-land
living?
animals?
Fish.
Fish.
Let's go land animals.
I'm going to go with non-land animals. Just thinking
I'm
of
gonna go
Finding
with
Nemo.
Sea creatures.
Yeah.
I gotta figure out what's going on down there.
Wait, so they're up to something.
There's something.
Something's
People are trying to
fishy.
get to space way too fast. Okay.
We should just be getting to the bottom
We're
of the
not.
ocean.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Would you rather have your grandmother's hairstyle or her first name?
Hairstyle. My grandmother's first name would be really weird.
I'm going to go with first name. Because
Actually, you know
it's
what?
great hair for them.
Yeah. Her name was Jean. I could just be Jean.
Huh?
Be French.
There we go.
Wow.
Hello, I am Jean. I
Wait,
would
so-
also only talk in an accent.
I think I'd go hair because it's two women, so it's not really gonna change much for me. I just need different hair. Would you rather have no fingers or foot-long toes?
Are we saying foot long? Are we saying or actual?
Like an actual 12 inches? Like a 12-inch toe?
The length of your own foot
Okay.
doubled
I mean, that's still a lot.
with the size of your toe.
Hey, come ahead. Let's go.
I'm Kristen.
Oh, you're good. I promise. We have a special visitor that just came in, so yeah. Okay, I'm going foot-long toes. Also better than no finger. Maybe, I don't know. Foot-long toes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Also, I could
I
type
think
with
foot-long toes.
everything.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Where clown shoes are already that long. You could make it
Oh
work.
yeah.
Stop.
What time? Okay,
Sandals?
okay.
Clown shoes? Come on.
Oh, sorry.
You
I'm
know
sorry.
better.
Sandals.
Okay, back to the fingers and toes. Would you rather have 8 fingers or 8 toes?
8 toes? Nobody would know.
8 fingers, because piano would be cool.
How many?
Like 8 fingers on each hand?
Or yeah.
Oh, we're losing.
That's totally
Oh, losing
throwing
to
me. I
no.
thought
Only
it
two.
would just look like a character from like The Simpsons.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna say on each
This
hand.
many? How does that work?
If it's 8 on each hand, then yes, I'll go with hands.
8 on each hand. Okay.
I wonder how
hands.
fast you could run with 8 toes on.
What?
I'm gonna
Toes
say
don't
toes.
make you faster.
They
What?
you have
What
more
kind of
grip.
science are you giving us over here? Okay, keep going.
Would you
This is
rather,
at least lightning round.
have to talk like Yoda or breathe like Darth Vader for the
Yoda.
rest of your life?
Every single minute of the day. I would love it. There
Yeah.
are multiple times I do that anyway, so.
Yeah, definitely Yoda.
I think
It's
Yoda.
more useful, I think.
Especially
Also,
if you said
breathing
together.
heavy coronavirus
Yeah,
is
it's
just not a
not
good
good.
combination.
Just not a good.
Would you rather eat a whole raw jalapeno or chug an entire bottle of mustard?
Jalapeno.
Yeah, jalapeno. No question.
Jalapeno. I don't know.
You can answer.
We can do it. I believe in us. Less
Would you
than 10
rather?
minutes this week.
Oh, we're doing good. We got 3 minutes. I can waste
Yeah,
5
I mean,
more
we're-
seconds. Okay. Would you rather encounter dinosaurs or aliens?
Dinosaurs. Oh, man.
Depends on the aliens.
We've already encountered one,
Dinosaurs.
technically.
Alien? We've encountered an alien?
No,
A
like
dinosaur?
in history,
Who are
we
you
know what a
hanging out
dinosaur
with?
is.
We know.
We
didn't
really don't know
encounter
much
them.
about aliens.
None of us in this room were hanging out with dinosaurs,
I
and
guess
I'm clearly the oldest one in this room. So I
We've
promise.
encountered the aliens. They were the ones who were doing the lightning round music.
Voices.
They came and recorded
True.
for us.
Yeah, that's
Especially
true.
those aliens.
Okay.
Yes, I'll go.
Yeah.
with
Dinosaur.
aliens. As long as they don't. As they're not. As long as they're
You
not
don't get to
too
choose what
weird.
the
Oh,
aliens
well, okay,
do.
fine.
The
but
aliens get to choose. Dinosaurs.
I'm hanging out with E.T., not Independence
Oh.
Day.
There we go. Yes,
No,
please.
never mind dinosaurs. Would you rather eat spaghetti through a straw or blend it into a smoothie?
Where do you get
I
this?
told you I was excited for these today.
Straw.
That's yeah, straw.
The other one just
It's
sounds
just
so
it's liquid.
gross.
I don't know about that. Yeah.
It sounds so bad. I ate mac and cheese through a straw once. Story for later. Keep going.
Did you answer the question?
Yeah, through a straw.
Okay,
No.
straw. Okay, we'll do one more. Would you rather be a giraffe with a neck problem or a hippo with who's allergic to mud?
What kind of neck problem?
Yeah, like
Like a
Is
crook
it like
neck.
just go sideways?
It's 90 degrees.
like an L shape. It makes everything a lot worse. Yeah, let's go that one.
So the
I
other
guess
option was
a hippo who cannot be in mud will die. A giraffe with a crooked neck is just goofy. Also,
They could
most famous
also-
zoo animal ever. Giraffe with a 90-degree neck.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I
Are
thought
you
you said
kidding me?
giraffe.
Yeah, like no, I would be in an amusement park by myself.
Oh.
Just,
I don't know
a
if that's
giraffe
how
neck.
amusement parks
Yeah.
work.
Let's
Yeah.
say zoo, but clearly haven't had enough coffee today. I'm done.
I'm good with the giraffe, by the way.
Okay, I think we're gonna end there. I'll save these for later.
That was shorter than
6 minutes.
last week. I
Way
think.
shorter than last.
We did 10 minutes last week. We are terrible at this. This is not lightning round.
Very
We don't
bad.
have Chelsea to like
That
Keep
get
us
us
on
back in
task.
line. Yeah.
We
Dang
need
it.
to just start calling it snail round until we can figure this out. But then we have to create a whole new intro.
we can do that though. Speaking of.
Speaking of. Bye guys. We'll see you next week. Well, actually, no, we won't. We will record an episode to show you next week, episode 67. So join us for that, and then we will see you again in 2 weeks, live on Facebook.
Bye.
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 Are we done?
Are we good? Are we good?
We're good.